Well, here we are. Last year, let's be honest, it was kind of boring. No one got in, but this year, people, is the year of reckoning. That's what I'm calling it. This is the year of reckoning. This is when the proverbial poop hits the fan. You've got Clemens, you've got Bonds, you've got Schilling, all in year 10, their final year of eligibility. That alone would be enough to get me going. When you got Bonds, Clemens, Schilling, oh, this is decision time. But then, just to throw a wrench into things, let's get a brand new A-Rod on this ballot. Let's get a brand new David Ortiz on this ballot. That's just going to muddy the waters further. The theme of this video, and in my opinion, the hardest thing to come by when filling out a Hall of Fame ballot, is what I would call ideological consistency. It's really hard to fill out a ballot without a little bit of cognitive dissonance. You're going to have to make a hypocrite of yourself one way or another. And look, this is the strongest ballot in a while. I think voters who don't vote for 10 players are probably making a mistake this year. If you're not going to vote for 10 players on this ballot, I think it should be because of a very strict personal enforcement of the character clause, because there's so many guys statistically here who are Hall of Famers in my mind. And you know what makes it a lot worse is that we are in lockout mode. I'm recording this on the night of December 1st. The CBA is about to expire, and I'm just under the assumption we're going in a lockout. So because we're in a lockout right now, this is all we have. This is it. No free agents can sign. So if you thought the Hall of Fame discourse was bad normally, it's going to be worse, because this is really all we have going on right now. And look, I'm not in the BBWAA. I will fill out my mock ballot in this video, but my vote does not count, and probably never will. I think we should probably start with baggage. So many players have some degree of baggage. It could be PEDs, it could be, off the field stuff, but there's a ton of players on this year's ballot that have just something that makes it hard to vote for them. So that's why I'm going to start out here with a segment called Baggage Claim. Do I have a prop for that? Can you see it? I've got my suitcase right here. Maybe this is in poor taste. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to go through these players' baggage. I think in terms of responsibility as a voter, even if we're just pretending to be one, you have to think, well, we're honoring these guys. They're going to give a big speech and represent the game of baseball. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the baggage. Okay, look, in all seriousness, this isn't a contest. This is not going to be a thing where I try to turn this into a weird comparison where I have to say, oh, player X did this, and that's unforgivable, but athlete Y did this, and actually I think that's okay. This is simply just going through the names on the ballot and telling you why voters might have personal reservations and, sort of a wish to invoke the character clause. Also, just full disclosure between me and you, I don't really consider myself to be a judgy person. This doesn't apply to anyone on the ballot in particular, but I just generally think we need a more forgiving society. And it seems like sometimes people make a big mistake, maybe even a few big mistakes, and they're given no chance to show that they could be better. They're just sort of branded as a bad guy for life. Not saying that about anyone here, but it's just that's my general philosophy. So we're going to get started here with Curt Schilling in his final year of eligibility. I know some of you are super excited for me to be like, oh, he's a conservative, and here's why that's bad. He's Curt Schilling. That's what it is. I think even if you're a right-winger and you're actually really cool with his political takes, you got to keep in mind, Curt Schilling did defraud the entire state of Rhode Island to make one video game. So, that's not very nice, I would say. And then the other thing to keep in mind, regardless of political affiliation, is this right here. Journalists are the people who vote for the Hall of Fame. So, you can see why they wouldn't like Curt Schilling. That's what this is about. It's not about scolding anyone, really. It's about explaining why voters might want to invoke the character clause and leave these people out. Barry Bonds, also in his final year of eligibility. He has the PEDs, the Balco scandal. He also has allegations of domestic violence. And I think everyone knows and talks about the former, but maybe the latter doesn't get enough coverage. There's a lot of what I would call baseball progressives right now who want to let in these PED guys like Barry Bonds because they were so great. But now they're grappling with the fact that Bonds has domestic violence allegations from multiple partners throughout his life. Roger Clemens, also in his final year of eligibility, he's got the PEDs, he's got the Balco scandal, and he also has allegations of an inappropriate relationship with a minor. You can Google that. So both Bonds and Clemens, I would say, in similar positions. They're all-time greats. Bonds might be the greatest hitter in modern MLB history. Clemens might be the greatest pitcher in modern MLB history, statistically speaking. But they have both this, PED steroid stuff, their, involvement in the Balco scandal, but also they have some really unsavory stuff off the field. So I would say up front, we talk about ideological consistency. I will say it's probably ideologically inconsistent to vote for one of Clemens and Bonds, but not the other. Next up is Omar Vizquel in his 5th year of eligibility. He has domestic abuse and sexual harassment allegations, a lot of them recent, a lot of them coming out, I would say, within the last year or year and a half or so. And this is important because he was making really good progress early in his Hall of Fame candidacy, but now I think it's basically dead in the water. I don't think he's getting in, and I think these allegations ultimately have sunk him. Todd Helton in his 4th year of eligibility, he's got a couple DUIs. That's really all there is. They still let Tony La Russa into Cooperstown and they let him coach the White Sox, don't they? But yeah, couple DUIs. Andrew Jones in his 5th year of eligibility had a domestic battery arrest in 2012. Then you've got Manny Ramirez in his 6th year of eligibility. He failed PED tests twice, and it's not just about that he failed them, it's about the era in which he failed them. See, he cheated in an era where the rules were very clear and enforced, which are, I can't say that about guys like Bonds and Clemens and Sheffield. It was very clear, when Manny Ramirez got caught twice, that what he was doing was wrong. And another player that sort of fits that description is Alex Rodriguez. And A-Rod, I think, has a fascinating candidacy going on because despite how bad and clear-cut his PED stuff is, right? Unlike, Bonds and Clemens, he served his suspension. He failed a test. He served his suspension. He missed a whole year, but he has also rehabilitated his image in ways that Bonds and Clemens never will. I would say compared to most of the players we're talking about in this section, he's well-liked. And then you've got David Ortiz in his 1st year of eligibility, and here's sort of the cliff notes to this story. So basically, the New York Times leaked what was supposedly a list of names that failed a voluntary PED test in 2003. It was supposed to be anonymous. You weren't going to be punished for failing. There would be no suspensions, but his name just happened to be on that list. And I think it's a different situation for Ortiz than the other PED guys. He wasn't caught up in the Balco scandal, wasn't part of the Mitchell report. You can't even say what substance he potentially tested positive for. So that's kind of where I'm at on Ortiz. And then you've got Sammy Sosa, and Ortiz is in his 1st year of eligibility on the ballot, but Sosa is in his final year of eligibility on the ballot. And here's the thing. The thing that happened to David Ortiz is also the exact same thing that happened to Sammy Sosa. So Sammy Sosa and David Ortiz have the exact same amount of PED suspicion, evidence against them. And yet, it seems like Ortiz is definitely going to get in eventually, and Sosa won't. Why? Well, everyone loves David Ortiz. That's just a fact. Everyone loves David Ortiz. Even Yankees fans, I would say, love David Ortiz. And Sammy Sosa makes people uncomfortable. Why does he make people uncomfortable? There's a few reasons. One of them is this. He's basically, using some sort of skin cream, bleached himself white. He's close to a persona non grata in this game, whereas Ortiz is going to be, on your Fox Sports broadcast every week, Everyone loves David Ortiz. I'm not saying it's fair, but that's what's happening in my mind. The other thing with Sosa to keep in mind is the corked bat. He was playing a game, his bat broke, it was corked, he served a suspension. And for me, that's the shield right there. Like, when I look at what voters are doing, that's how a voter can justify voting for David Ortiz but not Sammy Sosa. It's the corked bat thing, and I think it's kind of crummy. I think there is, potential for ideological inconsistency there when someone votes for Ortiz but not Sosa. Andy Pettitte, he got caught with PEDs and he fessed up. He's probably like the first big name player I can remember who actually apologized for it. Torrey Hunter, in his second year of eligibility, really well-liked guy around the league, I would say, but he did make some comments a few years ago that I'd describe as homophobic. And again, I don't relish that these things happen, but we should just get it out there. Lord knows I'm not perfect, and, if this is a reason why a voter might leave him off their ballot, it's worth saying. Jeff Kent, in his 9th year of eligibility on the ballot, not really any off-the-field huge red flags. It's just that his teammates thought he was kind of a jerk, not a well-liked guy. And, with Hall of Fame voting, it can be a popularity contest. So I'm not saying, you shouldn't vote Jeff Kent or we have to get out there and we have to condemn Jeff Kent. It's not like that. I'm just saying that might be a reason why a voter leaves Jeff Kent off their ballot. It's worth saying. And then we got a couple other newcomers, first year on the ballot type guys. One of them is Carl Crawford, who was arrested on assault in 2020 and is also being sued by Megan Thee Stallion over record label stuff. This is actually true. I know it sounds like Mad Libs when I say that Megan Thee Stallion has sued Carl Crawford, but yeah, that's basically happened. And then finally, you've got AJ Pierzynski in his first year of eligibility. He's just a classic baseball villain, and I personally admire his commitment to being the heel. He's not going to get into the Hall of Fame either way, but I just felt like pointing that out. Not a popular guy in some circles, and this voting can be a popularity contest. This is all to say that this really is not a fun time to be a Hall of Fame voter right now. You're under a lot of scrutiny as is to evaluate these guys on their baseball merits, and now you've got to deal with the baggage, and there's so much baggage. So with that in mind, this is my appeal to you, the Hall of Fame voter watching this. Just start with Scott Rolen. Please, I know there's so many difficult questions you have to grapple with. Let's just start with Scott Rolen. Put a nice big check mark next to Scott Rolen's name, and then you can figure out what to do with the other 9, because Scott Rolen is a very good baseball player, and he is the zero baggage candidate. Scott Rolen is 10th all-time in WAR and JAWS among all third basemen, and he is the closest thing on this ballot to a sabermetric darling like Tim Raines or Larry Walker in years past. Third base is an underrepresented position in the Hall of Fame. There have been a lot of really well-rounded players at that position, like Buddy Bell, Greg Nettles, Darrell Evans, and they never got any love in this Hall of Fame voting process. And I think Scott Rolen is actually better than all of them. I'd compare him to Hall of Famer Ron Santo. So in light of all the ugliness that's going on here, I think a really cool, really positive thing to do would be, as a voter, just start your ballot with a check mark for Scott Rolen. He got past that 50% threshold last year. This is only his 5th year on the ballot, so he's got more time. But let's just keep him on pace, keep him on track to reach 75% by the time it's all said and done. The ballot is more crowded this year, so I'd love to see him, still continue to make gains and still, get more popular support. So, with Scott Rolen in mind, let's talk about some other interesting sabermetric cases, and one of them is Billy Wagner. Relievers are a tricky topic because of their usage. I think you could make the argument that the only reliever that belongs in the Hall of Fame is Mariano Rivera. But I think Wagner actually takes after Rivera pretty well. Among pitchers with at least 900 innings pitched, he is second in ERA plus to Rivera. Wagner is also the only reliever since integration with 900 innings pitched and a whip below 1. And he has the lowest hits per nine and the highest strikeout percentage, again, among pitchers with that many innings pitched. He's also 6th all-time on the saves leaderboard. So, I think I said this last year. He has 900 innings, right? But his 900 innings stack up against anyone's 900 innings. And because of that, I'm pro Wagner. Then you've got Andrew Jones, and the argument for Andrew Jones on a statistical level is dead simple. The defensive metrics think he's the greatest defensive center fielder of all time by a pretty solid margin. And I think if you just told someone that the best defensive center fielder ever also had 434 career home runs, you'd probably think they were a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that goes for really any position, not just, a premium position like center field. If you told me the best second baseman or right fielder of all time defensively had 434 home runs, I'd be like, yeah, that's a Hall of Famer. Duh, that's Andrew Jones. Next up is Todd Helton. Course! I like Todd Helton because, to me, the 300, 400, 500 slash line, it's sort of like the platonic ideal of great hitting. When you have a batting average over 300, on base over 400, slugging over 500, you were just doing a lot of good hitting, man. And I think, when you look at it, everyone who hit those marks over a full career is either a Hall of Famer or will be. The most comparable hitters to him in terms of career plate appearances and career OPS plus, his is 133, are Fred Clark, Jim O'Rourke, and Al Simmons. These guys all played a long time ago, but they're also all Hall of Famers. For me personally, I'm a Todd Helton convert. Initially, I was so obsessed with Larry Walker that I kind of ignored Helton. Now that Walker is in, it's Helton's time, baby. I'm pro Helton. Another guy is Jeff Kent, and this isn't really even sabermetric, but I just think it's worth pointing out. Jeff Kent hit for power at a position where that just doesn't happen historically. Among players who played the majority of their games at second base, he leads all of them in career home runs with 377. He's also 7th in hits all time for second baseman, trailing Eddie Collins, Nap Lajoie, Rogers Hornsby, Charlie Gehringer, Robinson Cano, and Joe Morgan. That's pretty sweet company. And then we've got Bobby Abreu. Bobby Abreu is a pretty cool one because he has 0 Hall of Fame vibes. If we're doing a vibe check, nobody watched Bobby Abreu play and thought, yep, there goes Bobby Abreu. He's a future Hall of Famer. No one really thought that. But what does Bobby Abreu have? Well, first of all, he has 8 straight seasons of 100 walks. If you like a on-base king, Bobby Abreu is one of them. Only he and Frank Thomas have done that since integration. And in fact, the only other hitters with a higher career on-base percentage and more career stolen bases than Abreu since integration are Barry Bonds and Rickey Henderson. Abreu is also basically tied with Vladimir Guerrero in terms of Baseball Reference WAR and Jaws. So again, Bobby Abreu, 0 Hall of Fame vibes, but you know what? A fun statistical case can be made. Now we've got Joe Nathan over here, and Joe Nathan's in a really interesting position right now because his position is, well, if Billy Wagner gets in, and then we loosen our standards for relievers just a little bit more, then Joe Nathan should get in, right? That's his position. You could almost say the same between someone like Scott Rolen, who's going to eventually get in, I think, and then, here comes Evan Longoria down the pipeline. Again, if Rolen gets in, here comes Evan Longoria. We got to think about that. So here's the pitch for Joe Nathan. He is one of only 9 pitchers in MLB history, nay, Major League history, with at least 900 innings pitched and an ERA plus over 150. The others, Mariano Rivera, Billy Wagner, Bill Foster, there's some Negro Leaguers on here, Bullet Rogan, Jacob deGrom, Clayton Kershaw, Pedro Martinez, Satchel Paige. These are all Hall of Famers, or, just guys that will be. Kershaw and deGrom, they will be. And then if you want more of a reliever-based stat, he is one of 6 relievers in MLB history with at least 20 WAR and 30 WPA. That's win probability added, which is a stat that I actually really like for relievers. So, the other 5 are Dennis Eckersley, Hoyt Wilhelm, Goose Gossage, Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, all Hall of Famers. You know, Joe Nathan is in what I would call strategic voting position. You know, this is his first year on the ballot, and he needs to break that 5% threshold in order to stay on for next year. So I actually think it might be wise to free up a spot for him if you can, just if you think the conversation is interesting. So now what I'm going to do here is just go through all the new players on the ballot. These are all the names you can see here that are in italics. So we're going to get started with Alex Rodriguez. You ever heard of this guy? He is statistically one of the greatest baseball players of all time. He's the best shortstop since integration, blah, 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 696 career home runs, 117 WAR, and this is really just interesting for A-Rod. He has rehabilitated his image in the media by being a girl boss. That's what he is. A-Rod is a girl boss. He has a huge business, success, win, mindset. And so for him, what's keeping him out potentially, it's really just the PED thing. You know, after years of rumors, he violated MLB's PED policy in 2013 with a failed test, and he missed the entire 2014 season. You can see it, just a big slab of gray right there. He was suspended. And this was in an era where there was just no gray area in terms of enforcement. And I think he's an interesting litmus test because, you know, his steroid stuff is, in my opinion, you know, worse than Bonds, worse than Clemens, yet he's also much more well-liked. So again, big theme here with the ballot, ideological consistency. The other big newcomer here is David Ortiz. This is a guy who really puts the fame in Hall of Fame. You know, the people who are like his critics or his detractors, they might point to the fact that he only has, 55 career WAR. There's guys who have a higher WAR than that on this ballot that include names like Jeff Kent and Bobby Abreu. But, WAR is a cumulative stat, and as you can see right here, he didn't really get going until he was like 27. And he also has, just traditional stats, 541 career home runs, and really just as a hitter, maybe a stronger playoff resume than any hitter in MLB history. But yeah, he puts the fame in Hall of Fame, and to me, he's a no doubt like Hall of Famer if you're willing to ignore the PED stuff, which we already kind of hit and we talked about. So after that, we have Mark Teixeira and Jimmy Rollins. I think two very well-liked figures in the game. And I have them both pegged as just sort of Hall of Very Good. Tex was probably on Hall of Fame pace through like age 31 or 32, but after his age 32 season, he only played 365 games. And then Rollins, he's got an MVP award. He has a lot of hits, 2,455 to be exact, but he also has a career OPS plus below 100, meaning he was cumulatively, a below average hitter for his career. So in my opinion, these guys love him. Everyone loves him. Hall of Very Good. Jake Peavy. This guy won a triple crown, folks. Not only did he win a triple crown, he twice had the best ERA in MLB, and also twice led the National League in strikeouts. He's also a World Series champion with the Red Sox and Giants. Not a serious candidate for me, but, making the ballot alone is a huge accomplishment. It's good to sort of, talk about Jake Peavy. Justin Morneau. He won an MVP award. He did. It's true. He probably didn't deserve it. He probably should have gone to one of his teammates instead, but he did. 2006, MVP award winner. Also, won a batting title in 2014 with the Rockies. For me, not a serious candidate, likely one and done. But you know what, Justin Morneau? Great career. Prince Fielder, he was arguably on a Hall of Fame trajectory through like age 28. He had really good rate stats for his career, like he had 506 career slugging and a 134 OPS plus, which is actually just one tick better than Todd Helton. But, when you look at the playing time, not even 7,000 career plate appearances, 12 years. Yeah, just not enough playing time to be a serious candidate, in my opinion. Tim Lincecum, big time Timmy Jim, the freaky franchise. We talked about him on Foolish Baseball. He's not going to be a Hall of Famer, but maybe he has an outside chance at sticking around on this ballot, hitting that 5% threshold for next year. The point is this with Tim Lincecum, and that's what I said in my Timmy and Tulo video. Don't let Cooperstown dictate who you think is important, okay? Don't forget Tim Lincecum just because he's probably not going to get a plaque in a room in New York. Jonathan Papelbon. Honestly, a lot of what I said about Joe Nathan, you might be able to apply to the career of Jonathan Papelbon. And Papelbon also had some really memorable playoff performances, which I can't really say about Nathan. So while, I'm championing Nathan for strategic voting this year, if you want Papelbon to be that guy instead, I think you can justify it. Be my guest. AJ Pierzynski, not going to be a Hall of Famer, but here's a fun AJ Pierzynski stat right here. He is one of 9 players in MLB history to play the majority of their games at catcher and collect over 2,000 career hits. The others are Pudge Rodriguez, Ted Simmons, Carlton Fisk, Jason Kendall, Yogi Berra, Mike Piazza, Yadier Molina, Gary Carter, and Johnny Bench. That's pretty cool. Ryan Howard. He won MVP, and he hit 198 home runs in a 4-year span. 198 home runs in 4 years. He also won a World Series with the Phillies in 2008, and he's also, statistically, one of the worst defenders ever, and he really just kind of fell off drastically after his age 31 season. So, not a Hall of Famer, but ultimately one of the more memorable careers among newcomers to this ballot. And then finally, Carl Crawford. We talked about him. Good, base stealing, corner outfielder archetype going on right here. One of the first real stars for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. That's kind of how I always remember him. Before Evan Longoria, there was Carl Crawford. So, not a Hall of Famer, but, this is his moment to shine. Way to go, Carl Crawford. So now that we've been over so many names, so many angles. By the way, if you want my thoughts on Mark Buehrle, I would say to watch maybe last year's version of this, because I did kind of give a compelling argument for him as well. But now that we've gotten there, it's time for me to fill out my mock ballot. And what did I say to do? Start with Scott Rolen. There it is. We can only vote for 10 players, and Scott Rolen should be one of them. Now let's talk about PEDs, and there is a difference to me between getting caught, pre-Mitchell report and post-Mitchell report. The players who cheated when steroid usage was kind of like the Wild Wild West versus the players who cheated when they clearly should have known better. So the Wild Wild West players are guys like Barry Bonds. A Wild Wild West player is a guy like Roger Clemens. It also applies to Gary Sheffield. These are guys, they definitely used PEDs. They're all wrapped up in Balco. They were all named in the Mitchell report. But also, the league was really turning a blind eye to what was happening because they loved the bottom line. They loved that sweet, sweet cash. And then you've got the guys who got caught in an era where they definitely should have known better. And this includes guys like Alex Rodriguez, and it also includes Manny Ramirez. Again, I'm circling these names. I'm not voting for them yet. So it could be said, if you're playing this ideological consistency game, if you're willing to vote for Bonds and Clemens, then you should be willing to vote for Gary Sheffield. Or if you're willing to vote for Alex Rodriguez, then you should be willing to vote for Manny Ramirez. I mean, the level of offense is all the same. And then just when you didn't think it could get any sweeter, you have 2 other players on the exact same level of steroid suspicions, and those players are Sammy Sosa and David Ortiz. So again, we can play this game. If you're willing to vote for David Ortiz, then surely you should be willing to vote for Sammy Sosa, right? This is really sort of the philosophical crux of this year's voting. And we haven't even gotten to the off-the-field stuff. This character clause business adds a whole new dimension to these proceedings. So here's my take. Here's how I'm going to approach that problem. I believe in a steroid tax. If you're a steroid user confirmed, the statistical standards you have to reach just become a lot higher. you have to not only have a Hall of Fame career, but you have to have an inner circle Hall of Fame career. You have to be an all-time great. So this applies to Bonds, and this applies to Clemens, and this applies to A-Rod. But I can't quite say it applies to Manny Ramirez or Gary Sheffield. These are two of the great, right-handed sluggers, but, just overall as players, defensively, they weren't very good. I wouldn't quite consider them all-time greats the same way I would consider Bonds, Clemens, and A-Rod to be. And then there's the matter of Sammy Sosa and David Ortiz. We talked about this. The leaked New York Times test. It was supposed to be voluntary and discreet. We don't know what they tested positive for. And Ortiz, man, David Ortiz is just so beloved, so popular. Everyone loves this guy. He's almost certainly going to be a Hall of Famer. And then there's Sosa. Sosa over here in his final year of eligibility, no real shot of making it looks like. And guys, I personally can't separate the two. Some voters will use the Sammy Sosa corked bat incident as a cudgel. I think others will just sort of ignore the contradiction altogether. But Sammy Sosa hit 609 home runs in his career. He hit 60 home runs in a season 3 times. I just can't separate the two. So both Papi and Sosa get my vote. To me, they're both low-degree offenders, if there's any offense at all. So I'm not going to use the steroid tax with them. I don't like lumping them in with the other PED guys. And I just think Sosa has been treated really unfairly by this process. And I think even Ortiz is going to be treated unfairly to some extent, given the amount of suspicion surrounding him. So we talked about the baggage. Now let's talk about the character clause. The character clause is this nebulous concept that allows voters to supposedly put in players that are virtuous and keep out players that aren't. And I'll keep it real with you. Not a fan. I find it very arbitrary. I don't like how it's enforced because it only seems to be used to keep the bad people out. It's never used to put the good people in. If the character clause really mattered, they'd have to put Dale Murphy in, or they'd have to put Andrew McCutchen in when the time comes. Instead, they just use it to keep sort of the unsavory characters out. And whether you like that or not, the player that it's being leveraged against most right now is Curt Schilling. And I want to be very clear. Curt Schilling is a statistical Hall of Famer. He has more WAR, more JAWS than the average Hall of Fame pitcher, and he's possibly the best playoff pitcher of all time. But in Schilling's case, there's also an out, and the out is this. He doesn't want to be on the ballot. It's true. Earlier this year, he petitioned the BBWAA to be removed from this year's Hall of Fame ballot. He's sick of the process. He's sick of the writers. He doesn't like journalists. He wants to be a Veterans Committee guy. And personally, I say, let him do it. I'm not going to vote for Schilling on my mock ballot. Why would I do that? He doesn't want it. He doesn't want to be part of this process to begin with. Why would I make someone part of something that they just don't want to be a part of? Last year, I think Schilling might have been the toughest decision to make for some voters. Now he's literally the easiest. He does not want to participate in this, and you know what? I think that's his right. So now we've gotten through all that with 4 spots remaining on our ballot. We voted for 6 guys already. We can vote for up to 4 more. As I said at the beginning of this video, you should vote for 10. That's just my opinion. You should vote for 10. And one of those that I'm going to also throw a vote for is Andrew Jones. This is Andrew Jones' 5th year on the ballot. And last year, he made some pretty solid gains. He got up to 33.9% of the vote. And that might sound bad because you need 75%, right? But the general pattern is to, add a few percentage points every year. Maybe add 5 or 10 or 15 percentage points every year until you get to year 10 on the ballot, and then you just cross your fingers, hope for the best. That's kind of how it goes. That's what happened to Edgar Martinez. That's what happened to Larry Walker. I think he needs our help. And so he gets a vote. And you know who else gets a vote? Todd Helton. Todd Helton was, I think, the biggest gainer last year, of the more sabermetric guys. He has a lot of momentum going his way right now. And again, The game here is to just keep upping the percentage for these guys to be in striking range by the time they get to year 10, the year of reckoning. It seems like the majority of candidates either will get in year 1, year 2, or year 10. Year 10, that's the final decision, and that's the time when most players are going to see a boost when push comes to shove. Billy Wagner gets a vote, and I think the existence of Billy Wagner really sort of begs the question, what are the standards for a modern reliever not named Mariano Rivera? And everyone's going to have a different answer to that question, but for me, Billy Wagner fits the bill. I would highly recommend following the Billy Wagner for Hall of Fame account on Twitter. It is ran by my friends Jim Passon and Jeremy Frank. You can learn all kinds of fun facts about Billy Wagner. So I think with one spot remaining, one more guy can vote for. I think this is where we really start to talk about strategic voting. There are players who are at risk of falling off this ballot by not reaching the 5% threshold. You have to get at least 5% every year or you fall off. And your cringe and your L and your ratio and YB is better. Now, last year, I gave votes to Bobby Abreu and Mark Burley. And then there's also Tim Hudson over here who just squeaked by with 5.2%. These guys are in strategic voting range. And again, my vote doesn't count, but Burley stayed on, Abreu stayed on, Tim Hudson is holding on for dear life at 5.2%. And I will say that these guys, and I'll throw Torrey Hunter in there as well, they are still at risk because the ballot is more crowded this year. Imagine a guy who had some of these names on their ballot last year, but now they have to make room because they're going to vote for A-Rod and they're going to vote for, David Ortiz. That said, my strategic voting pick is a newcomer to the ballot, and that is Joe Nathan. This is a guy that I would like to keep around. I don't want Joe Nathan to be a one and done. And if something happens to, Abreu or Burley, or Torrey Hunter or Tim Hudson, at least they weren't one and dones. At least they had multiple years on the ballot for voters to look at their name and decide what they thought. So Joe Nathan gets a vote. That's my 10. I'll just say it real quick. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Todd Helton, Andrew Jones, Joe Nathan, David Ortiz, Alex Rodriguez, Scott Rolen, Sammy Sosa, Billy Wagner. That's my 10. That's my ballot. And look, there's more than 10 guys who I would be willing to vote for in the future. You've got Sosa here in year 10. You've got Bonds here in year 10. You've got Clemens in year 10. This is the year of reckoning, people. And so that's 3 spots that are going to get cleared from this ballot no matter what. And so, maybe in the future, I am willing to vote for Burley again. I am willing to vote for Abreu again. I am perhaps willing to vote for Jeff Kent. So I think it just really comes down to the fact that, there's probably more than 10 guys here who you could vote for, so at least vote for 10. So now I would like to talk about where I think these candidates are headed in terms of their long-term Hall of Fame candidacy. Are they going to get in? Are they going to get in this year? Are they going to get in eventually? This is prediction times. I've filled out my ballot, and now I want to do predictions as to what will happen when the BBWAA voting results are revealed on January 25th. So, of course, one guy I voted for is Sammy Sosa. Here he is in year 10, his final year of eligibility, and here's the thing, he's not getting in. It's just very clear to me. He got 17% last year. There's just absolutely no way he's going from 17% to 75% in the span of a year. And I'm going to do a swear word right here. So I just want to say, parents, if your 8-year-old is watching this on an iPad with a weird handle thing and a cushion, just skip ahead about a minute because I'm going to do a swear word. But anyways, one thing to keep in mind with regards to the candidacy of Sammy Sosa, and this is not a sabermetric argument at all, is that these bitches love Chief Sosa. And I think that's something that would serve us well to keep in mind. Moving on, and so Curt Schilling, who I didn't vote for, is also in year 10, and you know what? He got up to 71% last year, so of all the guys last year, he was actually by far the closest, because he got 71%, and you need 75%, and I think that most candidates who get to 71% in year 9 would expect to get in year 10, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think that Curt Schilling is going to miss out. And you know what? Don't feel bad for him because this is what he wants. He wants to, a jury of his own peers. His peers being, former players, managers, coaches, those guys, not the writers. And then you've got the other two guys who are in year 10, their final year, the year of reckoning, and that's Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, both last year with just under 62%. And, this jump is doable in theory. Larry Walker went from 55% to 77% in a year. Edgar Martinez went from 70% to 85% in a year. But most people are projecting Bonds and Clemens out. They're not going to get in. And I'm actually not 100% sure that's going to happen. Here's their thinking, and here's what I'm thinking. Okay, so you might say to yourself, okay, they only have to gain about 13% to get in. But what they really have to gain is 13% of people who probably haven't voted for them in 9 years. So it's not really about gaining 13%. It's about flipping the 34% of people who haven't voted for you in 9 years. But I do think there's a chance. And I think it's a question of, how many of these writers will stick to their guns in year 10, the final year, the year of reckoning. This is it, baby. Now or never. You could leave them off your ballot for 9 years and still be in this spot. And yet only now would I say, does the decision truly matter? Will it truly have a big consequence? And so, will some of those writers balk at the idea of leaving Clemens and Bonds out of the Hall of Fame entirely? I think so. The question is, how many? Now, if Bonds and Clemens do go to a Veterans Committee vote sometime down the line, I think they may find it actually difficult. These are not well-liked guys, and some of the rhetoric I've heard from former players and coaches, people who could be on the committee, suggests that they may actually be harsher on the PED users than baseball writers or baseball fans, but we'll see. Just depends on the makeup of the committee, I suppose. Then we've got Scott Rolen and Todd Helton, and overall I've got to say I like where they're at. I like Scott Rolen coming into this year with about 53% of the ballot, and this is just his 5th year. Todd Helton last year, he got about 45%, and this is just his 4th year on the ballot. And I think, their trajectory suggests that they'll get in before their time on the ballot runs out. It's a good chance it'll be in year 10, that final year, but I like where they're at. I think long term they're going to be Hall of Famers. The slightly more borderline long-term sort of sabermetric guys to look at are going to be Billy Wagner and Andrew Jones. Billy Wagner, he does have 46%, but this is his 7th year on the ballot, so he's a little bit later in the process. And then Andrew Jones, he's at about 34%. This is his 5th year on the ballot. It's going to be interesting to see with these two in particular, how many more percentage points can these guys add this year on a ballot that is more crowded than years past? That's going to be worth paying attention to. Can they get some big gains despite the fact you've got guys like A-Rod and Ortiz as newbies? And I have a theory on these guys, A-Rod and Ortiz. I think that they are going to be second ballot Hall of Famers. We talk about ideological consistency, and I think voters aren't ready to collectively deal with the cognitive dissonance of letting a guy like Alex Rodriguez in, but possibly keeping guys like Clemens and Bonds out. Once those guys are off the ballot, once there's no Clemens, no Bonds, no Sosa, no Schilling, then I think it's time that they would let A-Rod in or they would let Ortiz in. So I think those guys both get in, but for 2023. And that really just leaves Joe Nathan. Joe Nathan in his first year on the ballot, like I said, for me, a pick for strategic voting. We're just crossing our fingers for 5% here. I'm not super confident he'll get it, but hey, if you're a Hall of Fame voter and you're watching this, I don't know why you would watch this, but take a look at Joe Nathan. Also, keep in mind that while ballots can be anonymous, many writers choose to reveal theirs to the public well before the results are announced on January 25th. So, if you want to track these as they roll in, check out the public ballot tracker on bbhoftracker.com. This is ran by Ryan Thibodeau and his team. There's only a few ballots in right now. I'm looking at 5, so you can't really make any conclusions based on that, but hundreds more will be added in the coming weeks. So that's it for the writer's ballot. You can see, one last time, this is my mock ballot. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Todd Helton, Andrew Jones, Joe Nathan, David Ortiz, Alex Rodriguez, Scott Rolen, Sammy Sosa, Billy Wagner. Leave yours in the comments. I'd be really curious to hear, where you guys sort of maybe disagree with me philosophically. Maybe there's, a player I'm overlooking. Maybe you're a big Jeff Kent guy. Maybe you're a big Bobby Abreu guy. Maybe you're a big Manny Ramirez guy. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to fill out this ballot, in my opinion. And look, that's the writer's ballot. But that ain't everything, because there are baseball era committees that are convening as well. So there's more candidates to talk about. So look out in the coming weeks because I will be breaking down the candidates on the early baseball era committee ballot. You can see the names right there, as well as the names on the 2022 Golden Days era committee ballot. So just look forward to that. A lot of Hall of Fame content coming your way because, well, it's a lockout. That's all we got.